Alright, so Paul Krugman came out with a piece recently about the government shutdown titled Trump's Big Libertarian Experiment. Now, I'm going to actually start off with a positive here. In the article, and it's a long article so I can't go through it all, but he actually does mention a lot of examples of how Republicans are all about big government for me, but not for thee, in that they don't mind big government if it's for their own pet projects. To that, I am in full agreement. The examples are nearly endless of Republican failings and outright refusals to curb big government, so I can actually agree with Krugman in that regard. But as I said, it's a long article, I can't go through everything, but I want to say that Krugman's assertion that the government shutdown is somehow a libertarian experiment is extremely disingenuous, and it has almost everything to do with expectations. I'll give you an analogy. There is all the difference in the world between someone who sincerely wants to get off drugs and clean themselves up, as opposed to someone who just happens to run out of drugs for the time being. What I mean by that is, what are the expectations of the furloughed federal employees as of right now? It's that the shutdown will be over at some point and then they can go back to work. They are being trolled along and not cut loose as libertarians would advocate for in this situation. In a sense, it would be far better at this point for these workers if they were just told, hey look, these jobs are not coming back, you need to go find work elsewhere, stop waiting around in this statist oblivion for this government to get its act together. Instead, they're waiting idly by, hoping they can get back to work soon. Now, I do want to say one thing about that. I, as a libertarian, would not advocate ripping the rug out from everyone in this way. As much as I find that rug to be dirty and disgusting, a much better approach would have been to tell people, hey, the job you have right now won't exist in 6 months or a year. I wanted to let you know so you have the time to make that transition. That would be a less chaotic way to do it that I think most libertarians would see the value in, rather than telling almost 1 million people that their jobs will be gone next week, but they may or may not be back in 2 weeks. Who knows? It depends on some stuff. Which it shouldn't surprise anyone when that leads to a great deal of indecisiveness and confusion and chaos, which ultimately leaves people in this employment limbo. One other thing to mention is that yes, libertarians have been posting memes and jokes about the shutdown and how the sky hasn't fallen, and that's fine, I think that's worth pointing out, but no libertarian worth their salt would advocate for a policy mirroring the government shutdown. It would not be this extremely ambiguous and opaque situation that would be impossible to get the timing of. So to Krugman, I have to say he seems to have a very immature and cursory perception of libertarianism, not to mention the fact that during government shutdowns, government becomes more expensive. That is not necessarily something that libertarians would cheer for, and leads me to believe that Krugman has a very incoherent view of libertarianism. Moving on, another very important point is that libertarians never asked for a government this large in the first place. We never asked for a government that employs 800,000 people that are considered non-essential. I was never consulted about having that many people receive paychecks, the money for which comes out of actual productive sectors of the economy. And who knows, perhaps if that money was left in the hands of people who actually have to react to society's needs in the marketplace, there might be a plethora of jobs for these people. That, to me, is not a crazy thought. Another point about how off-base Krugman is that there's something that is going to happen in the next 2 months that is distinctly anti-libertarian. It's something we all have to do. Pay our taxes on money we earned. This seems to beg the question, are there really libertarian fingerprints around this government shutdown? The only people who think this is what libertarians want, and more importantly, how libertarians would go about diminishing the government, well, those are people that would not be able to distinguish libertarianism from a pseudo-free market thinking Republican. And Krugman seems to belong in that group, since he apparently cannot distinguish between the two groups. He has a lot of audacity, and frankly, a lot of misplaced confidence if he's going to try and put blame on libertarianism for a terrible situation which the government is at the root of. Meanwhile, that same government is still siphoning off a bunch of wealth from people. Because as I alluded to before, resources should not have been misdirected in the first place to create an entire industry filled with non-essential employees. And also, one last thing, doesn't this, in some sense, show how incompetent the government is, and how misplaced people's trust and faith in government is? Should it shock anyone that something like this happens routinely? The government is $22 trillion in debt, and they have 800,000 non-essential employees at least. Call me crazy, but if you are a non-essential employee for the federal government, it does not seem like there is a lot of job security there. You cannot blame libertarianism when non-essential jobs blink in and out of existence because of high school level bickering within the government. But that's all for now. Please like and subscribe. See ya.